Koto and welcome to the games I got rid of in 2021. Now the purpose of these videos is to talk through the games that are leaving my collection and why they're leaving their collection, why they aren't keepers, why they're not going in the permanent shelf, and why I'm just kind of moving them on. And the reason I do these videos is it's a sort of exorcism for those games, banishing them from my presence so they can move on to a better and hopefully more peaceful existence somewhere else. Now that doesn't mean every game I get rid of I think is a bad game. I get rid of plenty of good games, a couple of great games even. But there's only so much space I have on my shelves, and there's only so much space I can have for each type of game. And it really is about keeping my collection at a manageable size where I can actually play the damn things because even though I'm a professional board game reviewer, I like to actually play games I'm not currently reviewing. And when you've got too many, it's really hard to get through them all. So if I'm not playing a game and it's not one I'm really that emotionally invested in, I gladly move it on to someone who will have a lot more fun with it. And I think that's just a good thing for us to normalize in the hobby. There's no point holding on to stacks and stacks of boxes of games you're just never gonna play again. So anyway, here are the games and we're doing them in alphabetical order. First up on the list is Chive, an incredibly good looking game that just didn't have the gameplay I wanted in it. Now, it's pretty safe to say that I'm probably not Chive's target demographic. I like my games a little bit meatier, and if I am going to play something smaller like that, I don't necessarily want a box, this big for a game that's really a light, small box kind of game. I'm sure there are plenty of people out there who love Chive, but after playing it 2 or 3 times, I was like, I've seen what this game has to offer, and I don't think I'm going to get any more challenges out of it. And that's really worrying. Like, after the first time you play a game, you shouldn't necessarily be going, I know how this game works. I know how to maximize my points already. I don't see this game throwing me any more surprises. All I have to do is this set sort of way of playing, and I should get a very high score each time. I still think Chive's a reasonable game. I just think it doesn't really do anything that hasn't been done before in another game, and many games have done it better. Plus, it takes up way too much shelf presence for what it is. Next up is Dinosaur Island, a game I really wanted to love. I love the whole dinosaur theme, Jurassic Park, making dinosaurs, putting them in pens, all that kind of stuff. I also really like the art style in Dinosaur Island, and when I looked at it, I looked at the rules for the game, I looked at everything about the game, I was like, I'm going to absolutely love this game. And Dinosaur Island is a pretty good game. It's just over-engineered for what it is, and there's these 4 phases and all this stuff happening in it, but ultimately it's a run-of-the-mill worker placement game with a few fiddly bits here and there, and no amount of cool production values kind of disguises the fact that it is just this pretty ordinary worker placement game beneath this really cool concept and really stylish veneer. Like, I really like the amber dice as an idea, but in game they just add resources to a pool that you then take to put in something and then place a worker to turn that into a dinosaur. It's a lot of flash and not enough substance. And worker placement really is a pretty crowded genre. I've got a lot of worker placement games I would rather play than Dinosaur Island. I'm still eagerly waiting to hear back from the Dinogenics guys, because a lot of people have told me that that's a better game than Dinosaur Island is, and I am very interested in trying it. Next up, we have Dune, a game of conquest and treachery. I can't remember the title. I just call it Dune Light. It's the light version of Dune that came out late last year. Now, in the review, I said this is the perfect version of Dune for people new to the hobby or who are fans of the film and want to try something, because it's got a fair bit to it for a game. Like, it's not Monopoly. Like, there is plenty happening in Dune. But I'm an old school Dune player, so I looked at it and I was like, oh, this is missing so much of what made Dune special for me. I'm not the target audience for this new game. I'm not the target market for it at all. So while I reviewed it, I put those words in my review that I knew this wasn't going to be a game I was going to keep because it wasn't made for me. And you know what? That's fine. Not every game needs to cater to my very peculiar wants and needs. And I already have Dune, so, more than happy to move Dune Light out the door and let someone else have a crack at it. I know a lot of people are fans of Dinosaur Island, so there's already probably a few people angry at me in this video already, but there's a lot more people who are fans of the next game, and that's Dune Imperium. I wanted to like Dune Imperium. I like Dune. I like worker placement games that allow you to do other stuff. I think Dune Imperium's a reasonably clever design. and I can see why it's popular, but I found it like just so dull. It was just a dull game, a dull, bloodless, lifeless game. It was general sort of worker placement stuff with some deck building in it, and a confrontation phase, which is like, for someone who's a wargamer at heart, it's like the most bloodless engagement I've seen in any game to simulate a conflict. It's just so unsatisfying. Now, you're okay to love Dune Imperium. That's perfectly fine. You can also think I'm terrible for not liking your favorite game, but it just bored the pants off me. And there's this thing in a game where people talk about theme and how it works. And for me, that's all about ludonarrative consistency, that doing stuff makes sense. And there's a lot of this happens because game in Dune Imperium. Like, you could honestly strip Arrakis out of it, make it about 4 colonial powers colonizing the New World, and you wouldn't notice a bean of difference aside from the card art would be different. And card art is not game theming. That's just art. Like, the game itself and its mechanics have to sort of reinforce that. And Dune is just not a setting where you're like, oh, I place a worker and get a thing, and I place another worker and get a thing, and oh look, I've collected the set of Fremen, and everyone else is collecting sets of Fremen too. It's just, yeah, solid, reasonable game, but I just found it dull and not really a Dune game. Like, that's it, I think. It's a solid, kind of dull game, but it's just not a good Dune game. And that's the sort of thing that really matters to me, is how much a game really grabs onto that theme and makes me feel like I'm living in that universe. And in Dune Imperium, I felt like I was just Dune, the accounting. This one probably won't surprise anyone. Evil Corp was a game I did a review of because, you know, I like the idea of it. It seemed like a novelty, but it's basically a glorified Munchkin game. And it had a really weird sort of pile on the leader. Second person tends to win because the first person gets blitzed kind of vibe to it. It was a little busy for what it was and really chaotic and random. Like, there's a certain Baron Pretzels crowd who love Munchkin and love that sort of game where you're like screwing each other over left and right. And for those people, this would be a good game. But my group's just, they're not really into that. We do like a bit of biff and we do like a bit of back and forth, but we don't like it being really sort of arbitrary and weird. And like, oh, this dice happened and this thing, so you lose that. Like, so yeah, Evil Corp, pass that one on. Next up is Funfair, and Funfair I got rid of, not because it is a bad game, and you've probably heard me say this a few times. It's fine. It's perfectly fine. The thing is, there's also Unfair, which is like the evil version of Funfair. And which one you like it's kind of interesting, because Unfair's a better game. Unfair has a lot more going on, but as the title says, it's unfair. It's an unfair game. Mean things happen. And that's fine if you go in knowing that it's this kind of brutal, unfair, mean kind of game, which you probably should because it's called Unfair. Now, Funfair downplays all that and gets rid of it and keeps the Funfair elements of the game, but takes away the nastiness. And it kind of takes out the special sauce. It's like there's a signature burger out there that has this really tangy sauce that you either love or you hate. And the people who love it are like, give me this tangy sauce burger. And everyone else is like, oh my God, this is revolting. That's unfair. Funfair is the same burger with no sauce. So you bite into it and you're like, tastes like nothing. And ultimately, that's why Funfair moved on. It's just a bit of a nothing game. It's a down-tuned, duller kind of version of a polarizing game. The funny thing is, I gave this one to the person I borrowed Unfair off because I borrowed Unfair off them just before the COVID lockdown, and we didn't see them for months and months and months. So I actually held on to that game. We moved house with their copy of Unfair. So I held on to the game for nearly a year. So I thought the least I could do would be to give the game back and give them Funfair as a sorry for keeping your game because of the pandemic for over a year. My bad. And COVID's bad. Next up is Four Gardens, a game I legitimately enjoyed and thought was incredibly clever. The main reason I got rid of this one is not because I disliked it or thought it was bad or anything, but because one of my playtesters absolutely loved it and begged me to give him a copy. And you know what? That's a perfectly good reason to give away a game. I get a lot of people who come around and test games with me, and they do it, you know, they give me their labor for free, mostly because they like playing new games, and I assume slightly because they like playing games with me. I hope so, but it's unpaid labor. It's unpaid labor for the channel. They're coming here, they're giving their time to help me test the games, and sometimes I just go, hey, you love that game so much, you've been around here a bunch, here, you can take it. Now, if I'd absolutely loved Four Gardens, I probably would have kept it, but it was on the cusp. Like, it was close to being a keeper, and if I was going to sell it or move it on in another way, I probably would have held it for quite a bit longer. But, you know, you've got someone who's there, they've contributed their time to you, you might as well, you know, give them the odd free game. Oh yeah, and if you're unfamiliar with Four Gardens, it's like really clever. It has a central tower thingy, and you spin it around, make moves to spin it around to collect different resources. It's a little bit different, and it's an innovative game. And now I'm actually slightly going, why did I give him that? Like, it wasn't that bad. It wasn't that bad. Like, it was a good game. I think he just begged. He just begged so much that I had to give it to him. I may be completely misremembering things, but that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Next up is Kitchen Rush, a game that has been on my top 100 before. Now, I've talked about a concept called game space before, and that's where you have multiple games that do something very similar, and there's no point necessarily having, you know, a half dozen games that do much the same thing, unless that thing is something that you really, really, really like. Like, do you actually need 10 different dungeon crawlers? Do you need 46 worker placement games? Maybe if that works out for you, but sometimes there's a specific game space where you're like, do I need an extra game of the exact same type in this category? And I got Rush MD, which is the medical, you know, reimagining of Kitchen Rush. And it's same sort of gameplay, same designers, it's a hospital instead of a kitchen. And I vastly prefer Rush MD to Kitchen Rush. Kitchen Rush is perfectly fine, but Rush MD is just, I love hospital games. Like, I am a sucker for hospital management stuff, and I love the whole picking up organs with tweezers and, you know, patients coming in and someone screaming out, ah, we need like 4 cc's of this stat. It's ridiculous. It is a fantastic, fantastic game. I love playing it. I backed it on Kickstarter. I got all of the expansions and stuff for it. So, you know, I've got this big stack of Rush MD stuff. Kitchen Rush, well, do I really need to keep that game? Am I going to go, who wants to play like real-time madness? And then you got to choose between these two things. I'm probably only going to play Rush MD, you know, once or twice a year, which means Kitchen Rush is probably going to get played, you know, once every 3 years or something. Do I need it? No, I don't. So that one's gone on because game space. Having multiple games in the same conversation when you're going, hey, we want to play this type of game. And if there's a second game that you just won't get to, well, maybe move that one on because you're always going to play the other one instead. Oh boy, now we're up to On Mars, a game that I had so many issues with. I did like a 10, 12, 15 minute long video about it with a song at the end. On Mars is a game that I have a lot of issues with, mostly because it just doesn't feel like it needed to be on Mars. Like, you go to Mars and you're mining crystals. Like, what? Like, I don't get why it's a Mars game. For me, it felt like a game that was designed to be an old world, new world colonization game that then just got rethemed because you've got the space station, this Orbital, and when you're up there, you can only make decisions and acquire stuff, but you can't communicate back to the planet. And I can't figure out with Mars how that would work. How you would have a station above Mars that can't communicate with Mars. That seems impossible to me. It does make sense if it's going back to the old world. And the mining of crystals, well, that's just classic New World exploitation of gold or silver. And the more I looked at it, the more I played it, the less Marsy it felt, and it got under my skin. And I'm sure it is, there are people out there who absolutely love the game, who think it's like the bee's knees. But again, for me, thematic consistency, ludonarrative consistency, that the game makes sense, that things are happening in-game because they make sense to the game's world, instead of this happens because it's a game. I can put up with that in some games, but when a game is sort of marketing itself as a thematic experience and it's got these dissonances in it, it really gets under my skin. And On Mars got under my skin like very few games ever have before or since. Last year was a funny year. A lot of the games that people really raved about, I just didn't get. Lost Ruins of Arnak, it's okay. Dune Imperium, yeah. And then Meadow. Meadow was quite popular with a lot of people, and I played it, and I thought it was absolutely forgettable. Like, nice looking game, but yeah, not much to it. I just really played it, kind of went, oh, well, that's that game done. And I'm sitting here now trying to remember the mechanics of the game, and I am struggling. Like, I did a 3-minute video on this where I learned all the rulebook, I compressed it down to 3 minutes, and right now I can't tell you anything about Meadow other than it involves moving north and south and collecting cards. One of the most bland, uninspiring sort of game experiences I had last year. Now, I had a lot of pretty average game experiences last year, but Meadow just stands out because I saw all the hype beforehand, I seen all the hype afterwards, and yet, for the life of me, I can't tell you much about the game at all because it just went in one ear and out the other. And that doesn't happen to me. I am a, mentat. I am a person who remembers rules and crazy things and lots of stuff about games. Like, I can pick most of the games off my shelf and tell you exactly how to play them. But Meadow, not a clue. I got a really nice picture from them and they seem like lovely people, but game just didn't hit. And the hits continue as I pick on another one of the very popular games from last year, and that's Merchant's Cove. First off, I will say I adore Merchant Cove's ambition. I adore what it set out to do, its aims, its ambitions, and its overall presentation and style. It's really clever. Like, the design thought, the design process that went into it, I think is really, really neat. But it's not for me. Like, for me, the game was a whole bunch of people sitting around a table playing their own mini game, and then we resolve it kind of in the middle. Like, asymmetry is a really cool thing to explore, and it was really neat for them to make these character boards and do all the stuff on them. And that's cool, but it just felt like everyone was in their own world doing their own thing. And, if you don't know the other players' boards, you have no idea what they're doing. But more importantly, what they're doing doesn't actually matter. What matters is the products they put out at the end and where they're putting the boats. But all of the complexity in the game is in these player boards, which is the definition of multiplayer solitaire. You are literally playing your own game by yourself. So yeah, a game I thought was really stunning, very clever, and ambitious as all hell, and my hat's off to them for designing it, but it's just not a game that interests me. After playing each of the boards once, I was like, okay, that's cool, I'm done. Oh, this is going to make me seem really contrary, because the next one up is Marvel Champions, which is rocketing up the Board Game Geek boards, and is really, really another popular game, and I kicked it to the curbside because I thought it was dull as dishwater. Oh, this is not an attempt to be edgy and controversial. This is just, I didn't like it. I like the Arkham Horror LCG, and I like the narrative aspect of that. This is a sort of game I really like. It brings you into the story. Things are making sense because you're playing clues and you're getting things, and cool stuff is happening. Marvel, on the other hand, uses a similar system to just kind of throw numbers at things until they fall down. Like, I'm not a big fan of the Marvel comics or DC comics. I've never actually read a Marvel comic in my life. And I suspect if you're a fan of Marvel, there's probably a lot more to Marvel Champions than there is to someone who isn't. To me, the character creation was kind of dull. It was just stuck in this sort of halfway house between Sentinels of the Multiverse, which I think is an expertly executed superhero game, which has a lot of cool stuff happening in it, and the Arkham Horror LCG. This is what I played with Steph, and she's got way stronger opinions on it than I do. She really hated it. Yeah, like she just screamed abuse at the screen of how little fun she had playing Marvel Champions. So yeah, Marvel Champions, a game for me that was stuck between two things I really like. On one hand, you had Arkham Horror LCG, and on the other hand, Sentinels of the Multiverse. And these are two things I really like. And Marvel Champions was in the middle, and it wasn't a peanut butter and jelly kind of combination. It was more of an awkward teenager with a squeaky voice. It's not quite a boy, not quite a man, just sort of stuck halfway in between being awkward and pimply. And the last game on the list is Star Scrappers Orbital. This was touted as a new game from the designer of Terraforming Mars, when in fact it's a really old game by the guy from Terraforming Mars, and it shows. It is definitely not a new game by the designer of Terraforming Mars. It feels old, it feels dated, it's not good. It was not a fun experience, and yeah, this one left my collection pretty much as soon as I finished the review. Like, it's interesting to see an earlier design by someone who would go on to make your favorite game and go, okay, I can see they learned lessons from this, but getting it sort of marketed as though it was something new and fresh and then it arriving would have been really disappointing to some people. It was like finding out that this artist you know that has like one mega cool album that you play over and over and over again actually had an earlier album. But that album is like entirely Kid Rock covers. And you put it on, you're like, well, I'm glad they got better. And that's my takeaway with Star Scrappers Orbital. I'm glad they got better. Now that's the end of the list, and remember, just because I got rid of a game or I'm not particularly fond of a game or I have an opinion that a game is pretty mediocre, that doesn't hurt your self-esteem. You can have your own thoughts about games and that's fine. Don't, swear and yell at me because I didn't like a thing you liked. This is all part of the cathartic process of moving games on from my collection, of exorcising the demons and making this house a clean and pure place free of bad memories of terrible games. Or in other cases, just filling the room with happy thoughts as someone else is enjoying the game more than I would. And in some ways, that catharsis of letting go of a game is a good thing. And if your shelves are crammed to the brim and you're wondering, where the hell am I going to put these next 30 Kickstarters I ordered? Think about moving some on. Think about clearing some space. Look at the games you've got on your shelf and go, am I ever going to play this again? Probably not. Consider moving it on. There's someone out there who will probably enjoy it a lot more than you are currently not playing it. A reminder, 3 Minute Board Games does not do paid content. Keep us independent by supporting us on Patreon. And if you enjoyed this video, hit the notification button, like, share, and subscribe to the channel.